I wanted to open by thanking all of you for coming. This is, our first in-person meeting in a long time. Probably some of you maybe not been to an in-person meeting yet. We used to have 3 or 4 times this crowd size, so it's just a gradual, slow opening. And we didn't have really the ability to do a virtual version as well. So our fearless videographer, Pete Miller, who has done veterans work with me for probably over a decade or more, even more than that now, 15 years or so, is going to film it, and we are going to put it online, so those of you that couldn't be here in person will have the ability to watch it. And because we haven't seen each other for a long time, or at least not seen each other with masks, and we have a small group, I'd like to start by just having everybody stand up and just tell us who you represent.
Jim Robinson, Combat Outpost Robinson, and we're here to support all veterans in the state of Ohio and their caregivers.
And I have to brag on Jim a little bit. He worked tirelessly on a problem where the VA was going to change the caregiver rules, and 9,000 caregivers were going to be let go, and it was just a massive problem. And through his tireless work of he and other advocates in the Dole Foundation, they got the VA to reverse that and put back the caregivers and look at the rules. I'm not sure whoever thought of that as a good idea, but because my mom had a caregiver. My dad was in World War II. We used that caregiver, and it was really helpful because she had a very small Social Security amount of money. So thank you, Jim, for that. I want to mention it. Lois?
Lois O'Sheller with the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services.
And she's one of our core Stepping Up team members.
Liz Kamat, I'm the project manager for Ohio Stepping Up.
And a very, very core team member.
I'm Teresa Russell, I'm the Criminal Justice Director for Sheriff's Office in Montgomery County.
And we're doing Montgomery County visit by Zoom on April 1st, and she's our main connection for that. So, Chief Mitchell, if you want to have some people watch that program, they can exactly see what's going to happen in your county. So it'd be a perfect example. So.
I'm Steve Terrell. I'm the co-chair of the Education Student Committee Task Force.
Joe Gellhart, obviously OSP, technical coach manager, and also CIT and mental health first aid instructor.
Jeff Mitchell, Lebanon Police, representing the Ohio Chiefs Association.
And he's on our steering committee.
With Sam Green with the Ohio Community Corrections Association, I represent halfway houses and the nonprofit run communities corrections.
And I believe you're also on our steering committee.
Future Sutton with the Stratton Police Adult Probation.
Joe Rossi, I'm with the Direction of Eastern Ohio Area
Clinic Director of the Office, Ohio Office of First Responders Office.
I'm Lisa Schultz, I co-chair the Research and Best Practices Subcommittee, and I work on the services.
And on our core committee.
Good evening, Samara with the coordination of the University.
Longtime partner and on our core committee.
Jeff Fudo, co-chair of the Law Enforcement Subcommittee. I work with CJ CCOB as well as the Ohio State Coordinator and Police Officer.
I'm not on the research risk evaluation manager.
Good morning, Ashley East, Submission Coordinator.
Hi everyone, my name is Emma Reddick, and I'm the Director of
Good morning, Shelter.
Good morning, Carol Baines, and everyone in Ohio.
Good morning, Monica Phoebe. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Lighthouse Behavioral Solutions.
Good morning, Dean Ramsey, Director of Department Resources.
I am Tina Coulter, the Assistant Director of Business Development at Columbus Springs.
I am Joyce Stankowski. I'm Medical Director of the North Coast Behavioral Healthcare State Hospital outside of Cleveland, and I'm the co-chair of the Psychiatry Committee.
Hello, this is Liz, Department of Mental Health and Human Services and Acting Director of
Hi, I'm Nick Jager. I retired from the Columbus Police Department. I am the Executive Director of nonprofit for first responders Probation.
Good morning, Caleb Newell, ORC.
Good morning, I'm Sarah Law, CEO of SourcePoint and Aging Services for Delaware County, and I'm also on the AGTF subcommittee.
Good morning, I'm new to all this. I'm Judge Stacy Cook with the County Council in support of being new to the Supervision and Probation Committee. Great to bring you today.
Luke Russell, County, Ohio, representative of families with serious insults.
Colleen Chamberlain, I'm with the Warden President of
Good morning, I'm Tom Craig, Director of Mental Health and Place Foundation.
And he's also in the core committee and has been my partner on almost every visit we've made.
Greg Miller, President of State Foundation.
And funder of much of the work that we do with Stepping Up, so thank you, Pegs.
Peter Frederick, State Foundation, Service Project Coordinator.
Also in our core committee.
On the X Foundation vote, custodian is Director of Stratton.
Also in our core committee.
Kathy Gilpin, Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, and Criminal Justice Bureau.
And also in our core committee.
Meyer Grant, also
And co-chair of Specialized Docket and frequently fills in on our core committee.
Dave Brown, Assistant Public Defender of Banner County, and I'm on the Code Docket team.
Hello, I'm Catherine, especially for Peter, and other county staff officer, and also our main person for
Great.
Mark Porter with the Attorney General's Office and I'm co-chair for the law enforcement.
Good morning, everyone. Melissa Pearson, I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the County Office of Justice Policy Programs, and serving right now with Federal Factors Stepping Up for years.
And we recently did our Franklin County visit by Zoom, and we had to cut it out at 100. We didn't know we had a 100 limit. It was an amazing meeting. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Susan Ballard, and I am the Mental Health Clinical Director for Evelyn Ohio Rise. Ohio Rise is our state's newest medication plan that will go live in July of 2022, serving our state's most complex and multi-system.
And recently joined our steering committee, so welcome. So we don't usually have time to introduce everybody because the group's often too large, but you see the diversity of folks we have here. Many folks have been involved a long time and some new faces. So just wanted to give you a quick history of the AG task force. For years when I was on the court, I had the the Advisory Committee on Mental Illness in the Courts, and Melissa Knopf headed Specialized Dockets then, and we worked together and had a very similar committee to the one we have now. And then about 12 years ago, then Ohio Attorney General Mike DeWine asked me if I would consider doing a joint committee with him, which ended up being the task force. So I merged my core committee, I closed it down and merged it with the Attorney General, and we put together like 8 or 9 committees and went off and running. And every 2 years we filed a report about what those committees had done. And if any of you are interested in your committee and what it's done, or in a particular area, please go on the AG website and look up the Mental Illness in the Courts Committee. You will see all 4 of those reports. We are now in the process of putting another report together because after Mike DeWine was elected governor, he created Recovery Ohio, and I became a member of that, but we didn't quite know what to do with the AG task force, and lo and behold, AG Yost approached us, and Melissa and I met with him, and he said he wanted to continue it. So we kept it on going, just kind of like it was, except that it grew and grew and grew, and it's been just a wonderful experience. And so Michael Sheline who's way in the back, is kind of the main person I've worked with from really the beginning of the task force, and is still one of my main contacts. And I don't think Carrie Hertel is here today. Carrie's not, she's the other main contact. And you all know Carolyn Bevins in the very back. She is the glue that runs it all. And if any of you have committees you want to join, or otherwise She's the one, and I'm going to send her the latest infographic with all the committees in case there's another one you want to join or one you haven't joined, and you will have a chance to do that. And so these committees have been extremely active. When you read this third report that we're in the process of, actually a 3-year report since we didn't do a 2-year one, it's going to come out shortly. All the committees have their reports in. It's amazing the things that have been accomplished by this committee. We have almost 500 members. We ask that all of the committees meet by Zoom. They could have a live option, they used to, but they always had to offer a call-in option because we didn't want to have people come to Columbus too often when they're on these different committees. And then we used to always have live meetings for this type of statewide meeting. And then of course we pivoted to a couple by Zoom before we did this one. And we usually do a theme. We've done aging, juveniles, reentry. It's just been a real good group of mix of presentations so that people can select what is most interesting to them. And for our first live one, since we were going to have our chief law enforcement officer here in person, we wanted to focus on some law enforcement issues. And so we're very thankful that Pete and Donna, who's over there as well, are able to tape this, and we can put this on probably on my site, my YouTube site, because I'm not sure the AG staff can put it on theirs, but we'll work all that technical stuff out. So just wanted to thank, and then Melissa Knopp has also been heavily involved in all the work that we're doing with all the steering committee and the Stepping Up and the AG Task Force. She's involved in all of those. We're going to later be introducing our probation committee, and we're excited that one of our co-chairs is here in person. But this is just, I'm just so grateful that all of you took the time to come in person, and that you have there's so many people in this room that have participated tirelessly on all of these many committees that we have, and have made some really, really huge progress in Ohio. And if any of you listened to the State of the State speech or saw a summary of it, we're going to have more work. The governor is really focusing on mental health. He's putting a lot more resources into the field. We have a lot of resources that have come down from the federal government. In fact, frankly, we have workforce development issues to try to even have enough people on staff to issue the grants and to figure out where they're going, because there's just a lot of money. Money used to be such a tough program, such a tough issue. It's interesting now, it sort of has flipped. Money is not the biggest issue we have right now. It's workforce, it's developing programs, it's finding a place to spend it wisely. And so we're really committed to doing that. I recently read a report about what some states have done with the COVID money and building a stadium, a baseball stadium, and a museum, and a art center, and that. But I don't see us in Ohio doing that. We have really been wise about spending the money where it's really, really needed. And so I am very honored now to introduce, who needs no introduction, our Attorney General Yost, who very kindly asked me to keep this thing going. I'm very grateful that he has. We are so appreciative that he has taken the time to, every time I've asked to meet with him, he's been wonderful about meeting, but we sort of run seamlessly with his staff and try not to bother him too much with things unless I really need his clout or approval or something like that. But he's going to bring us up to date on some things that are involving law enforcement in his office. So thank you.
Thank you, Justice Stratton. I have enjoyed working with Eve, her passion, her boundless energy. You have done more than anybody to move this full issue forward in Ohio and increase public awareness and organize us all. So I am grateful for your continued leadership and honored to call you a friend. I'm kind of glad that we took a moment and went around the room to introduce ourselves. There's a lot more people here than it looks like because it's a big room. If we were in a typical sized conference room, you'd be like, wow, this is a huge group. But it's actually a wonderful working group. The people that are not here today and are hopefully watching on video, I hope they will, because I've got a couple of larger issue things to say to you. I could very easily focus on the things that my office is working on. But this is an opportunity to talk to you about something I think is really important, because you see, I think we're at a sea change. I appreciated Governor DeWine's State of the State yesterday. I think he spent fully a third of his State of the State speech talking about mental health and related issues. And one of the things he said that really resonated with me, he said in 1963, when President Kennedy signed the act, the federal law that basically brought about deinstitutionalization, there was a promise to build an even better community-based system to serve those who have mental illness issues. And he said the problem is not that our system is broken. Those of you that work in the system may appreciate being told that you're not broken. He said the problem is that system was never built, or at least it was never finished. And I think that's exactly right. But the reason why this is an opportune moment for us to be gathering back together and taking stock, many of you here have association with law enforcement. That unfinished system ended up morphing and oozing into the criminal justice system, and without a system to deal with the deinstitutionalization and to provide mental health services and support, it fell to the criminal justice system, first responders, to handle so many things that progressed into a crisis situation. And we're going to talk about CIT here in a few minutes, and there will be law enforcement related components here today. But as we think about where we are today, there's a second pandemic that's happened. The COVID-19 pandemic, the uncertainty and chaos, certainly the isolation that it produced during the lockdown periods, has led to a second epidemic. It's an epidemic that is not recognized as such, although it's being commented on, and that's a mental health epidemic. From a smaller, more manageable problem, it has grown and morphed during this period of crisis into a new, nearly existential threat to our society. Parents are noticing that their children are having anxiety and stress disorders and worse, even suicidal ideation during this period of time. The reports of suicides and suicidal ideation across the board is off the charts. First responders are not immune to it. And I just 2 days ago lost a dear friend that I had worked with earlier in my career when I was a prosecuting attorney. He ate his gun, as we say, and my heart's broken for him and the loss that represents. We have an epidemic, a second epidemic in front of us, and that provides us with an opportunity as well as a challenge. The challenge is obvious. You'll all work in the field, you work in the courts, you work in service delivery. I don't need to talk to you about the challenge. You face it every day. But I'd like to talk to you for a moment about the opportunity. First, and maybe I should say secondly, because I don't think this is the greatest opportunity, but it is an opportunity for us to begin to think differently. Up until now, we have had to try to clean up the flood. We have been disaster relief workers in a lot of ways. Things that were preventable, conditions that could have been sustained and people supported and given skills and service to be able to navigate, so frequently spiral out of control and end up in our court system and in criminal justice system. But the new awareness out there, this this sense that this second epidemic is really out there, even though nobody's calling it that. People are noticing it. You can't pick up a newspaper, you can't turn on a TV without seeing people talking about the incredibly widespread mental health issues that have blossomed in the last 2 years. Gives us an opportunity to begin for the first time to not be reactive, but to be innovative and to think about maybe what might, in a better designed system, might we be able to pivot from and devote resources to more effectively, rather than just spending money to do more of what we've always done, which let's face it, there is so much. We have been forced in a lot of ways and a lot of times to be reactive to people in crisis. We now have the opportunity with the governor's leadership, with the potential resources, if we can get the General Assembly to go along with the governor that he was outlining yesterday. We have the possibility to imagine anew the work that all of us do in different ways. But the second thing is, or primary thing that I'm excited about, and I hope that we can all carry this idea into the conversations in our communities over this next year, is the fact that the widespread nature of this is finally beginning to break down the stigma of mental health, of talking about it. You've all told me about it for years. Back when I was prosecuting attorney, I heard over and over again, mental health is something we're not supposed to talk about. Nobody wants to face it. People that have issues, in their families don't want to talk about it. They keep it quiet. But what have we started seeing in these last 2 years? It's become so pervasive that people are talking about it. People who want to get their kids in to see a therapist, there was a story in the New York Times last week, are waiting 8 to 11 months just to get an appointment for a child who's in crisis. This is exploding. It's everywhere. But here's our great opportunity. When it's exploding, you can't not talk about it. You can't pretend it doesn't exist. And that provides us with a tremendous opportunity to change the playing field once and for all, to have a new paradigm of mental health and begin to talk about and educate about self-care. Wouldn't it be wonderful if self-care became one of the dominant themes of American society, if we were all thinking about that? Since I became Attorney General, and I'll be candid with you, my daughter works in the field and she's done a lot to educate me, and that's been pretty cool. But she and her friends, when they come over to their house, one of the questions they ask really struck me oddly the first time I heard it. What are you doing for self-care? And they ask each other all the time. It's a mutual accountability thing. Now, it's necessary for practitioners who are dealing with people in crisis and the stress of their lives, the secondary trauma that they experience, trying to help these people navigate. They have to be conscious of their own self-care and to hold each other accountable, to continue to pay attention to that week in, week out, day in, day out. But wouldn't it be wonderful if we took this moment, this second epidemic, the moment in time to have a conversation, and were able to ignite across our state, across the country, a conversation about the need for self-care, to be self-aware of what's bugging us, about the things that are coming out of balance or unglued in our lives, or the way our minds are working, or the way our experiences or our trauma are beginning to affect the way we process things, the way we react. wouldn't it be lovely if we were not dealing with the end of the process, but the beginning of the process as a regular kind of thing, and the limited resources that we have were still there to deal with the crisis. So innovation, possibility, imagination, maybe finally some more, or maybe all of that system that President Kennedy promised will finally be built. And a tremendous opportunity to recognize in this second epidemic that mental health is on everyone's mind, and that we who have been worrying and working in this area are in a position to help that conversation, to educate, to encourage, to build a more healthy society. I think we can. Let's do that. Thank you for all the work that you've done for so many years on the ground. And thank you for being here today. I hope this ends up being a good conference for you.
AG Yost, we are so grateful for your partnership and your support of this great committee. It's been great working with you these 3 years. And I've actually worked with them longer than that, but especially in this role. So I want to give you a little history of CIT in Ohio. When I got on the bench and I was involved in a bunch of other things, I always wanted to do something about mental health, but I really didn't know what to do. So I had my very first meeting, and I called a meeting with 10 people. Some of you heard this story. And I said, I have no budget, no staff, no training, no background. I have no idea what I'm doing. The only thing I have is I have a big title and people come to my meetings. And that is literally how I started, with 10 people. And Terry Russell was one of the 10 that came. And I heard about a mental health courts. There's 2 in Ohio at the time. And I heard about something called CIT, which had, at that time, about 100 officers trained. And it seemed to me like these two belonged hand in hand as a solution. So we put this committee together, and I connected with Lieutenant Woody, who was heading the CIT program for Ohio, and had some great ambitions for it beyond what some of the originators of it had in another state. And NAMI funded a lunch, and we started having lunches in these different counties. And Lieutenant Woody would talk about CIT, and I would talk about the need to start a mental health court. And I would try to identify a susceptible judge that might possibly be interested, and try to maybe challenge him in the luncheon in front of everybody to start one, to see if I could put some peer pressure on. Often worked. And we started growing that program from 100 officers, and I'm not going to tell you what the current status is. I'm going to let Ruth talk about that. But we did that county after county, and it kind of became the model for what we do now with stepping up in the county visits that we are doing. But after a while, I stopped doing that because we started having judges become ambassadors to other counties. And CIT was growing by leaps and bounds, and has become what it is today. I believe that we are the leading state in the country in CIT, and Ruth will give you that data. So very early on then, I started working with Ruth Samara, and she became a tireless champion of the CIT issues, and now she is the executive director of the Coordinating Center of Excellence. And Lieutenant Woody retired, and Jeff Futo has, where's Jeff? I see him now. There you are, right behind her. Jeff Futo has taken over that role, and it just continues to grow in so many different ways. And so it's really exciting to see, because, you know, one of the stressors for officer wellness, which you'll have a program on a little later, is not just the pandemic and everything, but the anti-police and the defund the police that have added such stress, and all of these calls for let's do more, having mental health people go out and that. Well, in Ohio, we already did that. We were way ahead of the curve in terms of responding to people with mental illness, and many of our communities have teams that have mental health professionals that go with them, and so there's just so much that we're doing that already was answering the call to deal with people with mental illness. But sometimes these people are dangerous. They're in a crisis. They're in the middle of a psychosis, and the cops are the ones that have the skills and the training to deal with somebody who is in that situation. it's not really a person with mental health training, but there's a lot of cases where you don't need a cop. And so we're working on developing that system through our crisis work and our partnership with the Department of Mental Health, and PEGS is really pushing the crisis work for Ohio and partnering with mental health. And so I was just so much happy. I could talk for 5 hours. But I want to turn it over to Ruth Samara, who's a key part of our core team, presents at all of our Stepping Up meetings, and Jeff Futo, who co-chairs the Law Enforcement Committee. And they are going to tell you about all the many wonderful things we have done in Ohio with CIT. So, please.
I'm really just going to introduce Ruth here and talk to you a little bit about the crisis intervention team and the model and what it's all about. But there is a point person out on patrol, working with people in crisis, interacting with them, helping them, but there takes a lot to do that. And that's what the CIT is about, and the CIT model is. It's an organizational structure that in most time we're set up at a county level for service boards, where the criminal justice system and the mental health system can come together, and they can collaborate, and they can talk, and they can structure their program, and they can assist people with experiencing mental health crises in their community. Its primary role is how to collaborate together and how to build this model locally with the resources and the time that you have. A lot of times we see the training part highlighted because officers are standing around and getting their picture taken, and it goes in the newspaper, and it often gets thought of as a training program. But it's so much more. It takes so much more to really support the public safety telecommunicators and the police officers that are out there working with people every day. And that's really what this program's about. These are some draft goals we have through the CJ, CCOE as we work through other communities through Ohio. And as we talk about these interactions with people that are experiencing crisis, is the safety of everyone involved. And it's not just preparing the officers to be safe themselves, but preparing them how to deal safely with other people. And in that process, we're looking to improve all the outcomes when law enforcement interacts with persons in crisis. And by doing so, really relates to the next one that's just all highlighted, which is really law enforcement learning about how to access and understand their crisis response system and everything that goes along with the crisis response system. They're all different. They all have different resources. They all operate very differently. And it can be a strange world to law enforcement to navigate that world. And that's really a highlight of CIT, is where they go locally into communities and they teach those officers and those public safety telecommunicators, those probation officers, those correction officers, how they can navigate their local crisis system, with the goal of diverting people in crisis to treatment alternatives when we can. It's kind of what this is all about. And how do we transform these local crisis response systems to only use law enforcement officers strategically? And I think that's a great goal there, that as we move into the future, if we can not have law enforcement show up, if we have other resources to deal with people in crisis, how do we make that happen? How do you make that happen locally? And here's the CIT model. We have ongoing elements, operational elements, and sustaining elements to the model. And that first part that has to be ongoing is getting your leaders together and developing those partnerships between the criminal justice system and the mental health system and advocacy, bringing everybody together and really committing to this model, really committing to the time and resources that you have to build this model up within your community that might look very different from the community next to you. And then how do we formalize that into some type of written paperwork? For law enforcement, it's a lot of our policies that we have. I think one thing we learned and we saw during COVID is all of a sudden people just, they lost their jobs, they retired, we were in a work shortage, and a lot of what we call institutional knowledge was lost. And then people are like, well, how do we do our jobs? Well, this is one way that we use that is through written policies. And we can pass that along, and it builds a culture. So there's many reasons why policies and procedures are important, but it's imperative in the crisis intervention team model. Operational elements is training and defining our roles. So whether you're a law enforcement officer, whether you're a public safety telecommunicator, whether you're a corrections officer, probation, a coordinator, all the different roles that we have within CIT, and then training them to their specific purpose. So again, we often hear about the law enforcement officer's role, but there's a lot of other trainings that we do that once we create this framework for people to work within, we have to teach them about what their specific role is in that and how to function. Big part, mental health receiving centers. And we talked about earlier about that a little bit, and systems being broken. But, you know, what money do they have to function? What is their staffing? And how does that relate to officers when they're dealing with someone in crisis and their decisions that they make, where I can take someone to a hospital in my community, I can take someone to a mental health facility in my community. Well, there is no mental health facility. I just got to take them to a hospital. Well, that one's not open, or this is not open, or only one that's only a county over. So where are they going to find themselves? We're going to find ourselves in jail. So, or the transition becomes difficult. So that receiving center and how that transition occurs is extremely important in all of our communities, and it's why it's an operational element and part of the CIT model. And then as we look to the sustaining elements, we're looking to let's collect information, data, and figure out if we're being impactful with the goals of CIT. And then continue to train, and then let's recognize the good work that everyone's doing so that it will continue. And then last but not least, let's see how we can expand not only within our own communities, but expand throughout the state and continue to grow CIT so other communities can see the value. So what this model is meant to do is we're looking at these criminal justice system services like police services, the court system, and then we're looking to utilize all of these other services within the mental health system, whether it be crisis stabilization, therapy, both short and long-term care, housing, income supports, mobile crisis units, whatever that consists of. If we can utilize those services and if we can engage our community members into those services, hopefully they're not going to be engaging the criminal justice system, which oftentimes starts off with a law enforcement response. And our partners are vast. This is only just a short list, but really sometimes people don't see themselves as part of their local crisis response system, but they are. And this list can go on in many of our communities. So the CIT model is very interesting because it has it's a prevention model, it's a response model, it's a diversion model as well, and it's built in that we have some improvement in there, and how can we succeed and be impactful and even be even better. So what are our keys to success before I turn it over to Ruth? Is that network of relationships I talked about at the very beginning, continuing to have those relationships and continuing to talk in a positive and constructive manner. Ongoing commitment from leaders, time and resources, especially now, are imperative, and it's going to continuously have leaders meet, talk, and commit to the CIT model. Understanding your crisis response system. Imperative for your law enforcement officers to understand how this whole thing works locally, which is what, again, CIT is all about, is at a very local level. Building your response system infrastructure, policies and procedures that we talked about, formalizing this, training everybody so that we're all on the same page, and continuing to look at what we're doing and be more impactful as we can, so that we can divert people from the criminal justice system and make sure they're utilizing the appropriate system, which is the behavioral health system.
I know Jeff wanted to share a little story about himself, and I certainly can't do that on his behalf, but one of the things I do want to acknowledge is that the shoes he has filled the past few years have been very, very big ones. You know, with Lieutenant Woody, who started with CIT back in the year 2000, And he was our key law enforcement liaison and coordinator for all of those years. And Jeff may not remember this, but when in my earlier part of my career, in the mid-90s, I was developing a community police-based response program with mental health and a crisis mediation program targeted at diverting youth from a juvenile justice system. Very successful program. So we got to spend a lot of time with first responders and develop something very similar to CIT, but it predated CIT in Ohio. And in the midst of that, in the late 90s, the mental health board director said, wait until you meet this officer at Kent State, Jeff Fudo. You want to keep your eye on him. He's an officer to watch. I didn't think much of it at the time. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. And I crossed paths occasionally with Jeff. Many years later, I came to NeoMed, to the Criminal Justice Coordinating Center of Excellence, and Lieutenant Woody said, you keep your eye on this Jeff Fudo. And I thought, it's twice in 20 years somebody said that to me. And I said, okay. A few years later, he said it again and again. And then he let me know, Lieutenant Woody did, that he was trying to kind of coach Jeff in the direction of CIT, and that I needed to start thinking about his successor and who that might be. And he kept bringing Jeff up. So we had the luxury of planning for Lieutenant Woody's retirement in advance. And he came to me one day and said, so who are you going to get to replace me? And I said, well, I was thinking about Lieutenant Jeff Fudo. And he said, as if it wasn't his idea all along, right? All along. So turns out he had been grooming Jeff. And so I shared that with Jeff when I approached him about Lieutenant Woody's retirement. And he said, he's been grooming me all these years. Yeah, he absolutely was. So there was just no doubt that Jeff was going to be our law enforcement liaison and coordinator. And he does a wonderful job. And by the fact that it was difficult for him to think about sharing his story tells you he's got stories to tell, and it's not just that he's doing a job. He's got things that all of us could learn from and that could be shared. So I'm going to talk just about how we go about disseminating CIT in Ohio first, and then share some things that have happened, particularly over the past few years, with the luxury that we've had, with the funds that have flown down from the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, initially through the state legislature, but now through some federal funds. We've been able to make a concerted effort around CIT. So first of all, the Criminal Justice Coordinating Center of Excellence, you got to hear that the staff are right there. Now leads the center, and Mikkel and Ashley support the work of the center. Haley Farver's not here. She's the CIT program coordinator. And then Jeff is our lead liaison to law enforcement. But we don't work alone in the center to disseminate CIT. CIT is a community-based partnership program, and that's a really important piece of the puzzle. It's not just a police training program, as Jeff was describing. It is a partnership among the mental health system, the community, and in this case, we oftentimes use NAMI affiliates to represent that community of people with lived experience, their family members, the peers, advocates, et cetera. And then the criminal justice system, largely law enforcement. So at the Criminal Justice CCOE, we model that same partnership. And we disseminate through our center as the technical assistance center for the state, but in partnership with NAMI Ohio. Luke Russell is our key partner there. And Angela Duggar, who's been working in the community a lot, is helping a lot now. And then Jeff representing law enforcement. So we try to make all decisions CIT with those three entities at least at the table, and that's really important. The other partners listed up there are CIT coordinators group. We just had a meeting with those folks yesterday, and they are many and wide and all over the state. Those are the folks that are overseeing the development of the program at the local level. They're the ones making it happen and know what's needed in their own communities, and they are pivotal to this work. And then the CIT program co-coordinator. So we kind of begin to drill in at the local level. And I think it's helpful for folks to understand how CIT is structured, because the coordinators are like program coordinators across a county or a multi-county area. And then they co-coordinate, typically law enforcement and mental health will co-coordinate for a whole county or a multi-county area, or it might be a NAMI director and a mental health person, or a NAMI and law enforcement. You almost always want law enforcement in that co-coordination mix though. And then drill in a little bit further to the jurisdiction level. Ideally, every law enforcement agency would have a mental health point of contact. If they're not a CIT coordinator, somebody that those program coordinators could go to talk things about mental health and how things are going in that jurisdiction. So that's the basic infrastructure of CIT and how we disseminate in Ohio. Our partners in that, the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, has been the core funder of our criminal justice CCOE since its inception, and they also are the entity that passes through those CIT support and expansion dollars. We operated for a couple decades without big financial support to CIT. It was all kind of bottoms up from the community, kind of leadership from top down, and now there's some funds to go with that to support and grow, and we're very appreciative of that. The Ohio Attorney General's office, not only through this task force, but for years supported NAMI Ohio and our criminal justice CCOE through grants that supported CIT, so that helped to create some foundation as well. The Office of Criminal Justice Services has also supported us both financially and just they're part of our collaboration board too, part of the think tank that goes into this. And they were the ones early on that provided the support to try the sequential intercept mapping exercises in Ohio. PEGS Foundation, who's also represented here, are funders of our Department of Psychiatry and our centers and Stepping Up, important partners, and Stepping Up Ohio, the initiative that's going on, really provides an umbrella for that. And then for those who aren't familiar, there is an international CIT organization, and it's called CIT International. They were most well known for their annual conferences for a long time, but they have since really come out with position papers and other information that's very helpful for us to think about what to do with CIT as we build it in Ohio. So CIT in Ohio is organized primarily by our Adams board areas. So that's alcohol, drug, addiction, and mental health services areas. Some of those are singular counties, some are multi-counties. With one exception, we have our first ever regional, which means multi-board area CIT program in Ohio. At the very beginning of the support and expansion project, when the new funds flowed down, there were 3 board areas at that time. Seneca, Sandusky, and Wyandotte was a board area. Erie and Ottawa and Huron. Well, Erie and Ottawa segregated, and Ottawa joined the Seneca, Sandusky, Wyandotte group. They all worked very closely together on CIT, and they decided to formalize that relationship along with Huron County. So those 6 counties, which cover 3 board areas, are now the Northwest Ohio CIT program, and they do everything formally together, and it's a pretty dynamic group, I've got to say. This map is thanks to the Ohio Association of County Behavioral Health Authorities, and we're going to have to create our own since the colors for Erie and Huron are different. So getting to the support and expansion project, the new funds that rolled down, I was really asked to talk about what have we done with that, what have been some of the outcomes of that. That project started very unfortunately January 2020, and we all know kind of what was beginning to happen then. We were planning for this, it was this great news, and then we had all this money and all these plans, and the pandemic hit, and the social unrest across the country all collided at the same time into this, what I thought was a perfect storm. And I just had like a failure, looking in front of me. Turned out it was a perfect opportunity. And it was probably the moment in time when I knew we had experienced a culture shift in Ohio, enough so that we had traction and momentum that we were going to really come through that, not only okay, but better. At the very beginning, when things just felt kind of just nutty in the world for all of us, we started hearing from law enforcement agencies directly to the boards, directly to us, saying, basically, what can we do? Agencies that had never been involved before saying, we're here, we want to be at the table, how do we expand, what more can we do, what different training do we need, how do we get involved? And I thought, wow, okay. So we were able to capitalize on that, and you'll see that when you see the stats in a minute. That project, the first one was 18 months. We're now in the second 12-month phase of that, and we're planning on some continuation. We don't know exactly what that looks like for next year. We established statewide goals associated with these funds and this project, and then also program-level goals at the local level by offering grants and subawards to individual communities. So some of the big goals that relate to training, we wanted to continue what was already a strong training trajectory for the patrol officers. We wanted to increase the percentage of law enforcement jurisdictions that were participating, which we knew would be a challenge. We were already at 72% across the state. That is really dramatic, and we don't know of any other state that had reached that at that point. So it's slower going to get individual jurisdictions at this point, but a goal nonetheless. We wanted to increase the advanced and refresher trainings to the existing CIT officers. That's a core element of CIT. We really weren't doing a great job of that in Ohio. People were hustling it out to just do the basic patrol officer training. We needed to put some effort into that, as well as those specific role partner training opportunities. So during this first 18-month period, we held 156 trainings across the state. This is just for the advanced refresher training. This is not for all of the patrol officer trainings. We had over 200 scheduled, but 60 some got canceled because of the pandemic. Over 61% of counties hosted trainings, and 90% of counties sent individuals to training during that period of time, which is really phenomenal. This is the trajectory. You can see where the pandemic hit, no? And yet we didn't zero out, we didn't bottom out. But look at the rebound in 21. Even when we were still being advised internationally, nationally, to not come back together in person to do trainings, the programs around the state rallied and really figured this out. And the Northwest Ohio group took the lead on that in creating a hybrid training that we didn't take lightly, that they evaluated, we've done a peer review on it, we consulted with inaugural board members of CIT International before we embarked on it. But kudos to everybody, because the need was there, the desire was there, and the funding was there to support such a resurgence of training. Looking at it a little bit more closely, this is representative of those folks that just attend that patrol officer training. So what we know to be the 40-hour CIT course. In some of our more rural communities, it might be a 32-hour course because there's some things that they just don't have and don't need to put in the training. But if you look at these figures, the bottom line, of course, is our patrol officers, and we're closing in on 14,000 patrol officers today that have gone through the training. The second highest number, though, are those corrections officers. So those are your jail staff. And in some cases, our Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections staff. I don't know that we still get all of their training data today. They run their own CIT program internally, and our larger jail systems, such as Franklin County, does as well. So a smattering of people participate in that patrol officer training. Down low there, you'll see public safety telecommunicator at 341. So those aren't necessarily your day-to-day dispatchers and call takers. Some of them are, but we do strongly encourage that supervisors and administrators of public safety telecommunication agencies go through the patrol officer course so that they fully understand CIT from all vantage points and will understand what an officer needs in the community so that they can then go back and help train their call takers and dispatchers and know what their role should be. And then we have separate shorter courses in the community for those call takers and dispatchers. This map is representative of the percentage of law enforcement jurisdictions in any county that participate in CIT. Some of you may remember an old red map. We used to look at the number or percentage, of law enforcement officers trained in any county. The whole map is practically red now, so this is kind of the drill in. Like, okay, we have that many officers trained, where are they coming from? Which departments are participating? And we run a CIT training report that comes out twice a year. It's a hefty report. Mikkel takes charge of that, and it just came out recently. If anyone hasn't received it via email, it usually gets posted on our website, and we're happy to send it out to you as well. And that shows grave detail for each community. But this map is a good gauge for us. We want to become all dark blue here. Those dark blue counties have 100% of their law enforcement jurisdictions participating in CIT. And we've put forth a lot of effort to try to help them figure out ways to make that happen through law enforcement scholarships. And by scholarships, I mean stipends, really, that can go to a law enforcement agency to underwrite the cost of maybe covering that person's shift so that they can go to training. It's not a scholarship to the officer themselves. And at the local level, more and more communities are using law enforcement coordinators and points of contact and assistance to do outreach to their fellow officers and communities to increase this. What you can't see here, this is the map that just came out, and so you can see, hopefully you can see in green, there's 4 communities outlined in green there. Those are the 4 counties that in the past 6-month cycle did increase the number of law enforcement agencies participating in CIT. And you can see that Hamilton County, by doing that, hit 100% in this last cycle. Previous 6-month cycle, there were 8 such counties that increased, and Hancock County hit 100% through their efforts. So we're just going to keep working on that. The really good news is, though, in those white counties, it used to be on the key that was 0 to 25% or 0 to 50%. Now there's no county with less than 20% of their jurisdictions participating. So all counties are participating in CIT in one fashion or another. Yes, Melissa? Absolutely.
What we're looking at, when you see 100%, that means all the jurisdictions in Cuyahoga County are sending folks to CIT training. My question is this, with the onslaught of retirements, promotions, people leaving the field, are we maintaining a balance? Are you able to track where we are each jurisdiction-wise to see that we're keeping folks trained?
That's a really good question. First, to the first part of your statement, this reflects all law enforcement agencies that are reported on the Ohio Peace Officer Training Commission report. So there may be pop-up agencies that don't hit the OPOTC report. To your other question, we did a study several years ago, a retention study around law enforcement, but it was pre-pandemic, and so it was pre all of those effects. But it was a lot of years in to CIT at that point in time. And what that study showed was that we had really good retention of CIT officers in Ohio, that over the course, I think it was around 15 to 16 years at that point, we were still retaining on patrol about 72% of CIT officers. What effect that the pandemic and all the retirements has had the past few years, we don't know. We strongly encourage the local programs to retain rosters and to check in with all their jurisdictions. And it's easy to do if you do it at training time, to send it out and say, here's the roster we have. What does it look like? Can you check this off, right? And then if they can turn that into us, but we have not done another study since before the pandemic. I wish I could answer that question, because we're curious too. We're very curious about that. It's on Mikkel's radar, yeah. So maybe that's a good OCJS grant opportunity, right?
Okay.
In terms of the advanced refresher and partner stakeholder courses that I mentioned, we had a goal to increase those. So this is a look at the 18 months prior to the first 18-month project and the look at the 18-month project, and the numbers pretty well speak for themselves, that the efforts that were put forward by the local communities setting goals and by utilizing these funds. NAMI Ohio, we use very strongly with the Support and Expansion Project by subcontracting with them to make mini grants available to the communities to underwrite the trainings. And so we've been able to increase those because of the funding that we've gotten. And so you can see in the 18-month prior, only 35 of the sworn officers who were CIT officers went through an advanced or refresher course. In the 18 months, in the first 18 months of the project, we had over 900 went through an advanced or refresher course. I mean, that's a night and day difference that the percentages are amazing. And then at the bottom line, 280 total individuals compared to over 1,500. The other thing that stands out here to me is the public safety telecommunicators. We did targeted efforts at creating trainings for them, and one of the strategies we used was to create a training of trainers. So people who were already seasoned at doing CAT training, were maybe seasoned officers or were coordinators, having them go through a training of trainer course, understanding what a course should look like, and then go back to their community to institute it. So we saw almost a threefold increase in the number of dispatchers and call takers trained during that period of time. And at the state level, similarly, we occasionally hold statewide trainings. We had held a CIT coordinators training, trying to get folks prepared to be CIT coordinators. And other seasoned CIT coordinators, such as Colleen at the time, who has since moved on in her position, but she was one of the coordinators that helped us put that training on to help train new coordinators. So we held that once over that 18-month period prior to the project, and we held one training of public safety trainers. And so you can see, it's great, and for a center of excellence, that's not bad. But with funding and extra support, we were able to hold 4 times that many courses and 10 times that many people got trained as a result. And we were able to add some training, such as probation, crisis intervention training. We held 3 or 4 trainings for public defenders and assigned counsel. Not strictly CIT, but officers have to, with their discretion, decide whether or not a person with mental illness needs to be arrested for something or not, or whether they can deflect or defer them, right? And we need good public defenders and assigned counsel that understand mental illness when that has to happen, because it's super important that those folks have representation right away and that they don't wait until after an arraignment for that to occur. So we've added that to our training. And then the other thing that we made available, I'll point out there, you see the 147 QPR. So many people are probably familiar with QPR. It's question, persuade, refer. It's an evidence-based suicide intervention and prevention training. And there is a specific law enforcement module for that. And so we purchased 200 slots for Ohio, figuring we could fill the gaps with, that could be an advanced training or a refresher training for a CIT officer, or it could be a training for an officer that hasn't gone through. And we have filled 147 of those to date, probably some more, but we have a few remaining this year. So if you know of a law enforcement officer that would like to go through that, just tell them to get in touch with us. Other statewide goals, people always ask us about data collection. We would love to be able to stand up here, and before I retire, we will stand up here and tell you how well CIT is working. Not only how many people are being served, but what are the results of that. We've probably got 15 to 20 programs around the state that are able to do that right now and do it well. Able to tell you the frequency of arrests, the level of use of force, and I can tell you, because I've seen all of those, the outcomes are good. They're very good across those programs. And we see things like even when a person with mental illness has yielded a weapon with a CIT officer, they are able to defuse that and take that person to treatment before deciding whether to take an arrest. It's really quite amazing, the culture shift that has occurred in Ohio. But we can't do that across the whole state, and that's what we want to be able to do. So we created a model contact sheet and a guide to go with that to serve as a model for communities to use. They can add to it. We ask them not to take away from it. But however they can institute that to have law enforcement keep track and to maintain records of the contacts that they're having, and then ideally to get those records handed off to mental health. Mikkel and Jeff really have been engaged in reviewing those 15 to 20 programs that are already doing analysis and reporting so that they can see what's the flow, what's meaningful, what's coming out of this to help inform the work that we're doing. And the work that we're doing, thanks to the Ohio Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services, is a pilot with Core Data, which is a database company that really focuses on healthcare and first responder. They do the quick response team database in Ohio right now. With 10 jurisdictions that are coming from 3 board areas that cover 7 counties, to see if we can find a common platform. And over time, I don't think one entity is ever going to collect all the CIT data, but if we can get everybody plugged in somewhere, then what we need, and I'm going to put this out to the universe because I know it's there, is somebody who's really good at SQL and then could pull all those into one place. So think about that. Other statewide goals, policies. Law enforcement agencies need to have policies. Everybody knows that. We've got the Ohio Collaborative that helps to put out standard policies about a variety of things, but CIT is a special thing, and you need to think about policies that are married to the policies on the mental health side of things, and that they work well together and aren't just procedural in nature, but what's your umbrella policies? So Jeff, with retired Commander Bowling from Columbus Police Department, they did a lot of research, spent a lot of time, and helped us to create a crisis intervention law enforcement policy guide that is CIT focused. And once that got published and put out, they helped to create a public safety telecommunicators addendum to that guide. It's available to everybody in Ohio, and we are seeing a nice increase in policy development at the local jurisdiction level as a result of that and the technical assistance session that was held to do that. So in terms of the local grants, and this will be kind of the last leg of my talk here, we had 29 communities in the first 18 months apply for grants from us through that support and expansion project. We set aside 2/3 of all the funds for the local communities, hoping that, because I like to hope for all, that all communities would be in a place to ask for a grant to do very local CIT work to expand and support their program. We had 29 programs do that represented, Cal, help me out. How many counties did that represent? Do you remember off the top of your head? It was, but you can see it here, but it's the ones in blue. The same ones reapplied this year. It was not a competitive process. That's really important. The money was set aside for everybody to be able to ask for the same amount of money per county or per program. And we continued that this year. So all of these counties that are displayed here participated either in the first 18 months or are participating now. The one in green, their application is in. They'll be our new county this year. So on the local side, goals and objectives. 42 programs equaling 44 board areas, 75 counties. Bless their hearts, because not all of them requested monies, but that many submitted the information packet that we put out there so that we could get baselines across the state on what was happening. It was super helpful to get a good read. And really the remaining counties, for the most part, were counties that don't coordinate or host their own programs. There were a couple that didn't turn them in, but it really was the minority that didn't turn them in. So we had good baseline information. And then we had the 29 program grants. Of the 9 programs that had a goal to implement marketing and public awareness campaigns around CIT, and that might have been anything from when to call an officer versus when to call mental health, or what the relationship is between officers and mental health, or just the awareness of what to do when you call 911, and that CIT can be helpful in mental health crises. 8 of those 9 completed those campaigns in the first 18 months. 58 of the 119 law enforcement jurisdictions that wanted to create policies completed that within the 18-month period. Many of those got no-cost extensions, and they're continuing to work on that now. 53 of the 68 law enforcement jurisdictions that wanted to either take on CIT data collection and information sharing managed to do that in that 18-month period. All of the law enforcement agencies that wanted to establish internal points of contact for CIT, so their mental health specialists, managed to do that. That was very exciting. And then 11 of the 15 who had goals to do recognition and honors, which, by the way, is a core element of CIT that you hold. And part of the reason for that is that so that the community understands CIT and they become aware of the presence of that program. For this year, goals and objectives at the local level are around training, speaker development. There's a long roster here. Policies and procedures continues to be a goal for some of our programs. It's certainly a goal for us. And information gathering and sharing with mental health is a powerful goal for us and for the programs. That's really where it's at. If you want to defer people at the point of contact with law enforcement, you've got to have connectivity with your mental health system. Development of CIT coordinators, primarily at the law enforcement jurisdiction level, is continuing to be a goal, although we've seen great growth in that. And then, of course, recognition and honors continues to be a goal. And then there's a variety of other things that sometimes they come up with, and just different approaches that can't get categorized easily in those other places. And one of them is steering committee development. We do require, by the way, that if somebody's going to get even a mini grant, much less a larger grant from us, they have to have a local steering committee to be talking about this work so that they can demonstrate that it's truly a partnership program and that it's not just training. So some other accomplishments real quickly. We were required to update our strategic plan for CIT at the beginning of this project, so we did. We have a 5-year strategic plan that will carry us through 2025, so we don't have to guess each year what it is we're trying to work on. During the course of that 18-month period, one of our Ohio officers was also recognized internationally as the CIT International First Responder of the Year. That was Jerome Fatzinger from Wayne County. Exciting for us this year is that one of the white counties on the map who's never hosted or monitored or maintained or coordinated their own CIT program is coming on board this year in Ashtabula County. The board has been ready to do that for quite some time. They just needed law enforcement to be ready, and they are. They were some of the ones that came knocking that year. So they should have their first training done before June. And then we do have CIT officers that are participating in Ohio MAS's crisis response task force and committees, as they're very invested in what's going on. And then I already mentioned that hybrid training course. The other thing I want to mention, because it came up earlier, is that we do collaborate with the Ohio Suicide Prevention Foundation now. They had some goals around wanting to, of course, increase the availability of training, recognition, intervention related to law enforcement, both with them as responders, but also to them as people in their profession. So we now collaborate with them on those goals, and CIT training, just so all of you do know, does contain suicide prevention and intervention blocks within it. So any law enforcement officer who completes CIT training is getting suicide prevention and intervention training. But one time is never enough, right? So hence that QPR training we make available. Same thing with public safety telecommunicators. So we report our numbers up to the Suicide Prevention Foundation, so they're aware of how many officers, dispatchers, call takers are receiving such training, and also how many of them are utilizing evidence-based training practices within their advanced training and training courses. And those are some upcoming events if you're not aware. Our statewide conference for CIT is April 6th. Registration for that does close on March 28th. It should be a good conference. We've got some good speakers. We have one of the CIT International past board presidents who does a lot of national research on CIT is coming to give one of the plenaries and workshops as well. And that's also where we give our statewide awards. And then the technical, we hold group technical assistant sessions every month, every other month, depending upon how we can schedule them, and they're all around the core elements of CIT. The next one's coming up in April, May, and it's really going to focus on community ownership and buy-in from law enforcement leadership. The training of trainers for the public safety telecommunicators trainers is in May, coordinators course is in June, and the international conference, which is nice and close in Pittsburgh this year, is in August. Any questions?
What's our total count of CIT?
The patrol officers?
Total trained.
Oh, it's 17,000. It's getting close to 18,000. Yeah. Yeah, officers, and probably today, officers are over 14,000, but we're always a little bit behind, right, in getting the rosters tucked into the data. So that's near 14,000, and the others exceed 4,000. Yeah, and that's just in the full patrol officer course. That's not in the specialized role-specific courses. Yeah. Yeah, Megan.
Is that typically then the local cabinet board that has decided to do the training that program?
Whoever is the overall program coordinating entity is typically, they run the training, so whoever's running the training sends Luke an email, and it's pretty straightforward to get those mini grants for the training. For the actual patrol officers, that request can come through the department. Usually we want to see the blessing of the coordinator, but in the end, we verify it with the training roster. So those are paid out after the fact when we see the officer completed, but we basically hold that scholarship for them. But it kind of runs through the same people. Any other questions?
Thank you all for coming. It's been a long time since I've been on this stage, or a stage in general. I think this is a first big meeting I've been to since the pandemic started. So thank you all for coming out today. One of the things we're working on is, what are we calling it, a triennial report now? To hope to have out pretty soon, and I know most of the committees have submitted your reports, things you've accomplished. Just wanted to once again, if you have anything more you would like to add, We are going to start writing that report and get it through our communications folks and hopefully get it out pretty soon. So if you've already sent your report, thank you. We appreciate that. If there are other things that you would like us to have a part of it with the work that's been done on your committee with the task force, please send it to Carolyn because we are going to start working on that pretty soon, writing it, and hopefully get it published, so to speak, and ready to pass out. So any questions about that report? All right, thank you very much.
The report is written in about 10 different ways, so the communications department is going to try to harmonize and do a similar style and get that looking nice and pretty to get it out. So, but we appreciate that when you read it, you'll be amazed all the things that we have accomplished. So one of the new committees I put together a couple of years ago, I kept thinking about education and stigma and all those issues, and I had been working off and on with Steve Terrell. And I said, you know, why don't we make another committee? Because this is such a big issue. And when we did the Recovery Ohio meeting, and we came up with our 75 recommendations for one of our Recovery Ohio's, one of them was about education and stigma. And I thought that's something we should take on. And I knew the perfect person to chair it was Steve Terrell, because he was so passionate about these issues. And so you talk about stigma and everything. I don't know how many of you read People magazine. I read it every night. My husband's like, why do you read that? I say, I need fluff in my life. I need fluff. And they run a feature every single week. They've been doing it now for a year or so, featuring some famous person, actor, actress, whatever, who has mental health issues, because their effort is to try to destigmatize it. So it's even reached that level, which is really important, because people always look up to, you know, the actors, actresses, sports figures, and when they can feature somebody like that openly talking about their struggles with bipolar and suicide and depression and those sort of things, it really does help. But we're excited that Stigma and Education has joined our team. They are one of our very, very active committees, and so we thought it would be great to have them talk about what they're doing with their work. And he's going to have Lieutenant, let me put my glasses up. Lieutenant Gebhardt to come up and co-present with him, and we're excited that both of them are here. Gebhardt, you were one of the first ones to show up this morning, so thank you.
I was just excited. Thank you, Eve, for the kind words. It's really give me an opportunity to strongly advocate what I advocate, and that is that we should learn to take care of our mental health as we have taught our physical health. I don't know what's perplexing about that. So we have a small nonprofit, my wife and I, and we do just that, advocate. And we have had a focus on mental health first aid for several years, and it's not our only focus. We think it's not one size fits all when it comes to this education. But because what you're going to hear is just pretty basic, it's for everyone. And I say it's not who, it's who first. And I'm going to start out by giving you a overview of the entire program, and then I'm going to turn it over to Joe, and Joe's going to talk about the focus on public safety and the version of mental health first aid public safety. And then we'll come back and talk about some references, some quotes from people, and then I'd like to tell you about the options, how you can take the course yourself, how you can arrange for classes, how you can become an instructor, and then scheduling and some related resources. So, behavioral health, first of all, I am not a professional in mental health. I grew up on a farm, I went to Ohio State. I was in technology, management, sales, alliances for AT&T and some other, and SAS, a statistics company. And, but I've always had this interest. And I've also had my own personal experiences, that depression, anxiety, coping with it, with alcohol. And it's not, and I thought, I never understood what's happening. I got it. When I took the course, I got on the mental health board, and I got retired at 14. We moved from Raleigh back to Ohio. And when I took the course, it started putting together pieces of a puzzle. You know, a puzzle you can't see. You don't know what the picture is. And because the course was very holistic, and it started talking about real examples and stuff. And you know, more and more I got into this, and then I saw myself and what happened. Well, it took another level because in July 2016, my wife and I became members of a group you don't want to be in. We're Gold Star parents. And suicide prevention took a very strong focus for me. So, as my son would say, you have to pay it forward. And this, I'm trying my best to pay it forward. So anyway, if you look at college courses, they start out with 101 usually. If you're an economics major, you know, you get the whole picture. The only course I ever decided, you know, not to take or opt out and take it again was accounting. They started with how you list an asset and whatever. I was a farm boy, I had no idea what bookkeeping was. It's because I'm a whole apart learner. I need to know the big picture. And these are kind of the building blocks, that foundation, that I think you'll get as one of the objectives of mental health first aid. As I mentioned, this holistic course, really the purpose is to lay a foundation and then teach you skills of how you can be a first aider. It's not to teach you how to diagnose or how to treat. We have, you know, that's something for somebody else. If you're a first aider, you're helping out somebody to get help. And it's true of physical mental health first aid, or first aid is true of mental health first aid. So it's people helping others. So as you're going to see from a law enforcement standpoint, it's a lot about wellness. You know, we have 3 focus areas in our committee. One is bringing mental health education to the judicial system. One is to the foster care system, and one is stigma. Now, I'm happy to say that I don't think I've heard anybody use the word mental illness. The AG talked about mental health. And you know, stigma is really about mental illness, you know. Don't want to talk about it, turn around, scared to think about it, etc. So I think we're seeing these changes. In the stigma, as I think the AG brought out, you know, it's all about understanding what mental health is. You're scared of what you don't understand. I use the word ignorant in my training. My wife says, you can't use that. And I understand, but you know, when you don't understand something, it can be, you know, scary. So anyway, this course was developed in Australia. It's offered in 25 countries, 46 million, you can read the numbers. I think there's almost 60 million in Ohio who have taken, 60,000, sorry, have taken the course. And quite frankly, we are in the bottom half of mental health first aid in the country. Our neighboring Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, and Pennsylvania have grabbed hold. Michigan, California, New York. And you know, these are also some of the same states that embraced K-12 mental health education, teaching it in the schools. Isn't that kind of interesting? We'd actually teach this in the schools. So it's evidence-based. You get a 3-year certification with the National Registry. And we're going to talk about the versions. The basic version that came from Australia was adults working with adults. And then, it seemed quite obvious, adults working with youth, it's different. Because the main thing that course teaches is that kid acting up because they're going through the growth pains, or do they have a problem or issue? That's a tough thing to do sometimes. And that course is quite different because it's adults working with youth. And you know the stages of adolescence and things that, typically that girls and boys go through as they grow. And I'm excited. We recently got the teen version. And it's teaching kids to help kids. Friends to say to their friend and help that friend get help. And what's interesting, some of the videos are excellent. They talk about what's a therapist do? What's your school counselor do? It's taking that, if you're going to go get help and you're a sophomore and you're having those things, it's scary. You don't have any idea I'm going to a therapist. What do I expect? What do they do? So anyway, I like the idea of kids helping kids. Now, the adult version, it was customized, tailored for different populations and professions. We have the first responder, we have those working with the aging, we have veterans, and we have those in the universities, both staff and students. And then we have the one we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to turn this over to Joe.
I gotta work?
You didn't get trained on this.
Well, first of all, thank each and every one of you for the work that you guys do. Steve and I have never met before today. This is the first time. He actually sent me a picture of himself. I said, well, I'll be in the uniform, but... Openly, I want to thank Steve and the work that he and his wife do. Unfortunately, like many of us, it took a tragedy to lead him on the path that he is on today. But here he is paying it forward. And to me, that's a sign of resilience. So thank you. He's passionate about this. He put together this PowerPoint. We talked several times. I could tell he was very, very passionate about this program. What he doesn't know about me, because he never taught, Molly does, because she's taught with me quite often, and Click knows, I really don't know what I'm going to talk about. I may go anywhere until I see the group. And I had the opportunity to listen to some excellent presentations. So I'm like, okay, what's my role today? Why am I here? And I'm a man of faith, so often it's you pray and say, okay, what's the message? Why am I here? Because I wasn't really even supposed to be here, was I?
Yeah, you were.
Eventually. I wasn't the first pick.
But you got a good reference.
I did get a good reference from a good man. So I have 33 years. Some of you are rookies. Majority of that, we didn't talk about mental health. And all of you know this. I'm preaching to the choir, ain't I? But for you out there, we didn't talk about mental health. It's a weakness, especially in this profession. I'm the one you call to solve the problems. I can't have problems myself. And the reality is we know that's not true, do we? So I've been a supervisor for over 25 years. And just until recently did we start talking about mental health. Now obviously it's been out there. We've shared that. But for me, my journey started around 2018 when I was called and asked if I would be interested in being trained in mental health first aid. Through the Montgomery County Alcohol, Addiction, Mental Health Services. I'm getting better at that. One other thing, when all of you introduce yourselves, I have to step up my committee game, clearly justice, because everybody's in committees. And I was like, man, it's awesome. It's awesome that the work that you do and the things that we're doing to promote mental health. As a law enforcement officer, sure, a lot of the things that I've learned helps me on the road and helps me with the citizens and helps me be a better police officer. But the fact of the matter is, it also helps me be a better supervisor. Really, more than a patrol officer, because I'm a post commander. The majority of the conversations that I have are with my own people. And when it's not with my own people, it's with my family, it's with my loved ones. So the reality is, it's almost selfish that I took this training and learned what I did, because I'm using it more for people that I love, as opposed to the people that I'm encountering on the street. Now, certainly when I do encounter those people on the street, I'm much more effective. And I'll tell you, there were many times where some of the skills that I've learned through these programs, CIT as well, obviously the gold standard, but my wife knows when I've been practicing, bringing some new skills to the table. And she's in the business. She's in behavioral health at Upper Valley. She does crisis support. And she has helped me as well. We're struggling. I'm going to openly tell you, Jeff, I'm with you. I feel you, buddy. For so much of my career as a supervisor, I felt like I shouldn't share. I shouldn't show weakness. That if my people came to me, I would listen. I would try to help, but I really didn't have the skills. But I wouldn't share. Well, I went through some struggles. And after a while, it just builds up and accumulates. And one day you wonder, why is this thing bugging me? It shouldn't bug me. I've dealt with it a million times. And the fact of the matter is the bucket's full. So you have to empty the bucket. So the skills that you learn in this type of training not only helps with your peers, your subordinates, your loved ones, but it helps with yourself. So there's portions of it that are the self-care. I like the words that AG Yost said. Self-care. We can all do a better job of that, can't we? So the nice thing, often we're asked, what's the difference when you talk about CIT, you talk about mental health first aid? I like to refer to it in a medical capacity. In other words, isn't it pretty useful that everybody has basic first aid knowledge? You're at home, your child starts choking, it's pretty helpful that you know how to do the Heimlich maneuver. Or if you're out and you see somebody exhibiting signs, maybe they're having a stroke or a heart attack, you're able to act. But then what do? You're not a doctor. Are you a doctor? No. You call 911. And then who shows up? EMS, paramedics, who have additional training and can maybe assess it a little better and categorize it a little better. But then what do? They take them to a hospital where the professionals are there. This is no different. For me, when I went through the mental health first aid, it was a starting point. It was basics. And it taught me a great deal that I could then build on. And I decided, I think I want to try out that CIT thing. And I'm proud that our county is 100% participation. And I took one of my guys who's empathetic and he's good with people. And he went through the training with me. And we've had a few trained locally. The stigma that you talk about. So many times when I do training, I do all sorts of training. Molly loops me, she's trying to loop me into something else too. But when I do the training, a lot of times I use my old examples of when maybe I screwed up. I didn't do so well. And you say ignorant. It's a bad word, but I was ignorant. Police officer. This may or may not have happened. Time of limitations, I don't know. The lady comes to the post, is struggling, clearly delusional, and as an officer who had no mental health training whatsoever, what am I going to do? I'm going to try to make her feel better, and I'm going to get her off post. So I came up with the old aluminum foil thing, right? At the time, I'm like, I thought I was helpful. She felt better. She left. She was happy. I was happy. I could go on my way. But I was ignorant, wasn't I? And now I know that you're not supposed to play into their delusions. That down the road, maybe she's lost trust. It is troublesome when you hear defund the police, and obviously it gets politicized and whatnot, but the reality is there are times where as a profession we don't do as well as we could or we should. community expects when they call us that we come prepared. As administrators, that's why it's crucial that we get our people properly trained so they have the tools. Not everybody can be a CIT officer. Mental health first aid is a good base. It's a good starting point. It's introductory. Here's some things to look for. Here's some signs. We'll give you 5 steps, the algae that we refer to. Take care of yourself. If you're interested and you think this is something that you want to pursue further, we recommend CIT, the next level, which is that connection, and that is so important. You're right. Since becoming a CIT certified, I've also been on the crisis response team, and that's given me an opportunity, a blessing, if you will, to be in some of these meetings with people that are hurting, people just like me. I'm in my infancy compared to some of you, this whole mental health thing. Chief Will Balling and I, Sydney, recently went to Dayton PD and taught their cadets. And I think that's really where this fits in, is at that introductory level where they haven't had a whole lot of experience yet. They're not really sure exactly what they're getting into. But here's a few things to look for as you go through your FTO period. As you start getting these calls, here's things to look for. Hold the fort down until the CIT comes or somebody professionally can come in and help. And by the way, don't be like me, 30 years in, trying to unload all this baggage. Take care of yourself as you progress through your career. And aren't we in a good position, just like AGTF said? We're in a good position. This is an opportunity. Here we are talking about this. And we will continue to talk about it because it's important. So when we talk about mental health first aid, it's a great starting point. I believe every department should utilize it. And the cool thing is also, we know CIT, you can branch out, but this is for everybody. This is support staff. This is for family. How important is that family support when you're in positions like ours? It's huge. And unfortunately, we know the statistics, not very good for us, are they? A lot of divorce, alcoholism, addiction. Put that on a recruitment poster, right? No wonder it's hard to hire, retain. But that's the cool thing about programs like this, when we talk about retaining our people. When I teach this, I say, it's too late if you're dealing with a crisis. It's too late. You have to establish that relationship well before the crisis. Or your employees aren't going to come to you. They're not going to trust you. They're not going to open up to you. And like so much of my career, I was closed off. They didn't feel like they could come to me. He's perfect. He's got everything going for him. He won't understand. So going through training like this, it opened my eyes. Be open. Share your story. And people then feel like they can connect. And that's ultimately what we're talking about, right? Connection. See? Told you. I don't know where I'm going. De-escalation, we know that's a big topic. With the patrol, we're also using ICAT, which is Integrating Communication, Assessment, and Tactics. It's all related. There are times we know where an officer, they don't have a whole lot of time. They have to react to whatever that situation is. But if they do have time, and they can take in that information and they can assess the situation a little more accurately, maybe it won't have tragic consequences. Because in our line of work, we know the term, it's a good shoot. It's a good shoot. There's no such thing as a good shoot. It just isn't. There may be me going home to my family at the end of the night. But we know the consequences, even if it is a good shoot, can be problematic. So we owe it to our officers. You guys are doing a much better job at it. We're a little slow.
but we're doing a better job too. And it's a main topic of discussion in our chiefs meetings and the Stepping Up program. I did see your program when you went to Miami County. I can't believe it's been a couple of years ago, but what a great program. We had a great turnout, and it's just so nice to see. So with that, the focus, dispatchers. We had a critical incident. I had an employee that was killed. Just had passed her, and she was out on the interstate, and I didn't stop and say hi. But 5 minutes later, as I get into my office, I get the call that she'd been struck and killed. The interesting thing about that, Molly knows, we have a member assistance team. Probably, I don't know, is it still the largest call out to date? We had 3 different sites that we had to deal with employees that were suffering. Molly sent the crew because I had officers that were on scene. We were trying to relieve them, get them to the hospital. We had family coming in, friends coming in. But she also worked at another facility, so we had to deal with those employees. And then the dispatch center, we talked about communications. And so many times in our profession, we forget about the dispatchers and that communication component, that they are suffering and they're dealing with the same type of incidents that we are. And sometimes we forget about that. So this training really helps in that regard as well. So when you talk about the 5 steps, and then I'm going to try to get back over to Steve. It's algae. Great stuff. It's basic stuff. And it's assessing the situation. First responders were always assessing the scene, assessing the situation. In this case, it's assessing self-harm. Are they suicidal? Once you do that, then it talks about listening. And not only listening, but listening non-judgmentally. How tough is that? We all think listening is an easy skill. Oh yeah, I can listen. Now the majority of the audience in here, you probably are pretty good listeners. My wife's a great listener. Me, yeah, not so much. Takes focus. And non-judgmentally, that's tough. It's tough in our profession too. For the longest time, you were a criminal. I was going to put you in jail. Because I didn't have the skill set necessary to deal with your mental health. All I know is you're committing a crime. People called. They wanted me to come and deal with you because they didn't want to deal with you. And I'm going to lock you up for whatever criminal offense I have. I'm glad we're away from that. Because that's not a solution. So you assess, you listen to them, you give them reassurance. That's why they call us. They want us there to help. They don't want us there to make things worse. And if a particular officer, and we all know them, they make things worse, get somebody in there that is empathetic and that can listen. And then at that point, we start trying to get them some help. Try to get them in the right direction. Encourage that help. And then the self-help, which is so important that we already talked about. So I'm going to skip all that because you people know mental health. You know mental health. Mental illness.
No.
Mental health. Good. So mental health first aid is the help offered to a person developing a mental health problem. A lot of times, what I've been encouraging my staff and my people is listen to each other. Let's not wait until there is a crisis. We know each other's voices on the radio. We know when they're stressed. We know when something ain't right, and the dispatchers as well. They'll start rolling that way. Well, it's the same with mental health. I had a high achiever, this guy, he went out and he just loved to write a bunch of tickets. And one day he just sounded tired on the radio. I'm like, that's not him. And he tried to walk by my office, grab his radio and leave. I said, no, get your butt in here, let's talk. And he was dealing with a lot of major stuff. Initially, he didn't share everything. He shared a little bit. Persistence, and then he shared a lot more. I'm like, oh my God. A couple days later, he told me the rest of the story. I'm like, oh, we should have told me that. That is a lot. You got a lot on your plate. So from me to you, when we talk about mental health first aid and we talk about CIT, that's what I have gotten from that training. It has made me a better road officer, but it's made me a better husband, a better father, a better peer, a better friend. And ultimately, I think that's what we're all trying to strive for, so. Steve, you want to take us home?
I can. I'm not going to go through this in detail, but I think a very important point is this training is a lot of fun. There's a suicide focus, a section. It's tough to make that fun, and you don't. But it's fun. It's very interactive. You know, we get comments back saying, this is the best thing I've ever taken. And it's because we just don't slide them to death. You know, we talk and we have scenarios you work through, say, the steps he mentioned, okay, at the you know, step where you're trying to determine what the risk is. What do you say? You do the role play, those scenarios. And the scenarios are those that are for that kind of profession in those kind of, you know, situations. And I think the interactivity just makes it, you know, so good. Now, I got to tell you, in person is the best. But we have instructors who, you know, during COVID, the virtual version came out, and they do a fantastic job having interaction with, you know, up to 30 people, you know, on Zoom. Some quotes. Rick Skelder is a retired police chief. He's also is now executive director for a very large nonprofit that's working with multiple boards that basically is a prevention education organization. The founder, Donna Dickman, I consider a mentor. Rick is, like yourself, a CIT and mental health instructor, and they use mental health first aid as first day in their curriculum. And then Will Balling, I'm glad he didn't accept. He did a great job. I asked Will to be my presenter up here, and he was on a committee with us. He's former president of the Police Chief Association, great guy. But anyway, he says, you know, it helps you to look past, you know, what appears to be the problem. And to, like you say, listen non-judgmentally, and to really understand, and try to understand, and show you care. International Association of Chiefs of Police actually endorsed mental health first aid and correctly believe CIT is gold standard. But they feel like, you know, the program it's for those who maybe can't or don't or haven't taken CIT, again, maybe as a first step to get them interested more. And then also for new cadets. They had their One Mind initiative. They talked a lot about mental health, where police organizations would commit and pledge to train mental health first aid. So we have some ODRC people here. About 3 years ago, Eve helped me get in touch with Stuart Hudson, and I basically had a discussion with him. He said, we really want our staff to be CIT trained. He said, but we'll look at the mental health first aid. I believe Teresa Jameson was there at that time. And anyway, and then we had another person who was a member of our foster care subcommittee, Kimberly, I believe is Toshin. And she said, we're going to get some money. So they have since trained 76 people in their facilities to be instructors. And they want to train staff who haven't taken CIT, and they also want to train inmates who are part of their mentor program. So that's real exciting. And I think they're working out things, because what they found was the scenarios really need to be tailored to the inmates and the situations that they get into, which is key, the role playing. The state of Rhode Island actually mandate that all take mental health first aid training. I'll go through this. I think Pennsylvania is probably one of the largest. Their corrections, they've trained 20,000. And overall, we're close to 100,000 who have taken public safety mental health first aid in the U.S. So So some delivery options. The classroom, the virtual, and the blended. The blended being you take 2 hours of self-paced pre-study online, and then you come back for 6 hours of in-person instruction. The 8-hour in-person classes can be broken up in 2 and 4 hours sessions to make scheduling a little bit easier. And the cost, often the cost, there's somebody else paying for it, but typically instructors will want $300 up, and the student manuals are $25. I want to thank this young lady, Lois, because she was instrumental in getting Mental Health America Ohio money from OMOS, and they put together a network of instructors, and I think they've trained since 2 years, I think 7,900 people across Ohio, and they do have a law enforcement focus, so they'll do it for free. Many of the county mental health boards will, and there's other organizations. I know, where's Jeff at, but Kent State, they've gotten grants, and I think they've got 12 instructors, and they do training within Kent State students, etc. Then if you want to be a trainer, and anybody can, but you do have to pass the course. And it is a boot camp, and it can get stressful because you're put out front and you're going to practice and stuff. They have courses, the National Council, what was called Behavioral Health. And by the way, this came from Australia through SAMHSA, the federal government signed it to National Council of Behavioral Health as a steward, and they administrate the program. They changed their name, National Council of Well-Being. Makes sense, doesn't it? So you can go get trained, anybody can get trained. If you want to hold a class, you first assign a coordinator, and then you pick an organization to work with. You communicate it out, and then you sign whoever that instructor is with the coordinator to work it out. Or you can send them to other classes, like I mentioned, Mental Health America. You go on their website, they'll tell you exactly how you can send somebody. Or you can host a class and you want it within your organization. I want to thank Monica, Katie. She worked with us last year, and we trained 8 veterans treatment courts across Ohio. I had the privilege of training 1 in Greene County myself, and we had some virtual training going on too. They could choose. And anyway, when she was with the Supreme Court of Ohio, we'd like to pick up on that, but we lost a good sponsor there. And anyway, and we also worked with DYS in the Reclaim program, and we had 20 courses last year, all of them virtual, and almost 400 people we've trained in the juvenile county courts. What we found was judges don't have a lot of time for an 8-hour course, and neither do court administrators and magistrates. And as I mentioned, this course, Mental Health First Aid, is a lot about one-on-one. We've hooked up with Dr. Dooley, who has a 2-hour course, and we're working with Judge Gill, and we're going to train about 75 of juvenile judges, magistrates, and administrators in June on the 2-hour. So we're excited about that. Again, one size doesn't fit all in mental health education. But I'm an advocate, start out with a holistic course. Going to suicide prevention, going to something on addiction, that's nice, but the brain doesn't work in just those components. It works together. We do evaluations too, and we have to, and they're turned into National Council, and we get all kinds of detailed information if you want it. The class uses average on a scale of 5 being high. It's usually way over 4 to 4.5. So, I think we've mentioned that I'm a member of Logan Champaign County Board. I've really seen the board since I've become more outreaching, more proactive, and less focused on just treatment, which I think is great. And I tell everybody, and I know we have an action item, Evelyn, to resources. They're a great place to start. And Ohio State has a resource guide that basically gives you county by county the resources, and it's online. It's a great, great website. I mentioned Mental Health America. You can find the course, just Google Mental Health First Aid. And we have this nonprofit, and I'm glad to help. It might be as simple as ODRC, and I just introduced them to the council and suggested what they wanted to do, and they took off with it. And I have to give stepping up to, we brought it to our county, and you know, we're a rural county. I would say we're backwards in some respects, but we're a typical rural county. And our board really, one of the gentlemen really stepped up and is taking advantage of all the value and benefits of stepping up. And certainly OMOS. So anyway, is there any questions? I got a question. How many has taken mental health first aid? I don't want to leave on this, but I can't help but think about it. We give a course to first responders, EMS and fire. Locally, we had firemen, and about 3 or 4 of them took it. Small fire department. About a year and a half later, we had a 20-year-old fireman take his life. And my friend, I talked to him, I said, "Did you see the signs and symptoms?" He says, "I did, Steve." And I was thinking, what am I going to say to him? Because he took the course, he's going to feel guilty. You all do. You know you feel guilty, no matter if you should or not. And I said to him, I said, you know, it's not that, you know, the responsibility is on you. But what if we had 10 people who've taken the course and just one caught the factors, the risk factors, and the signs and symptoms? Just one. You were the only one in that particular situation you knew about it. Everybody else, I mean, hey, before our son, I still think I would have seen if I'd been trained. So it's not who first. It's not everybody should be taking this course, you know, because it's just a basic thing to do. So that's my commercial. I thank you for your time.
We just have one final item we want to talk about, and that is our committees. Many of you are already on committees, and some of you are just members of the task force. I will be sending out our latest infographic, but we've added several committees. Best practice in mental health training in jails. This is a committee that has been doing 1-hour trainings. We've done one on generally what is mental health to help them recognize the signs and symptoms. One is on use of drugs in jails. We have a couple more coming up, and that committee is very active. Education and Stigma, you already heard about what they do. We have a new committee that's really the AG asked us to look at pandemic responses in the community justice and jails. And so we put a committee together, had a very robust membership, and then it's now evolved into what we are calling resource coordination and care continuum. And Dustin McKee is co-chair of that. And that's going to be a very active committee. And then we have a new one that I just want to talk about a little bit. And if Judge Cook and Melissa Knopp could come up, they're going to talk a little bit about it too. Probation and community supervision. We realize that probation doesn't really have a good home anywhere. They have a probation association, but they don't really have an umbrella organization. And we so approached Attorney General Yost and said, you know, you're a chief law enforcement officer. We've got the study that coincidentally came out right at the time we were thinking about this committee that Zach Hozaffel was very instrumental in getting funding for, and a committee was put together to study current probation issues, but they don't have any real enforcement aid group to try to put it together, pieces here and there. And so we decided to put this committee together, and Judge Cook was on that committee. So she was a likely victim of mine to ask if she would co-chair it. And Melissa Knopp has been heavily involved with probation issues all the way from the training we used to do at the court. So they're going to share a little bit about what the program is going to be. So if any of you want to join that committee, you can. Judge Cook?
Thank you. I'm super excited to listen to all the speakers today. I think as a judge, you tend to be in a box sometimes. We know how it affects our courts, our jurisdiction, but hearing all of you use the buzzwords that we're hearing in our own community, it's just reassuring that, look, this is global for all of us. With regard to community control and the probation, some of the same words that you've used today, even with our own inter-department issues, are the same things that are happening in terms of trying to make things work for community control. So being put on this committee was the first time that I was able to see other probation departments, other courthouses, how did they do things. So when you sit in your own court, and you know you've done this, where you're thinking, this isn't working, these caseloads are too much for the people, we can't actually get good work done, even though everybody's working really hard. We were able to look at caseloads, come to some conclusions on where caseload numbers should be, because we all know that when you go into your budgetary request in your counties and you say, we need more officers, they can't do this, we don't get more officers, we don't get the budget. But if we globally from our state look at it from a point of view and get a standard set, we think that we could get some stronger results in the community control. It's not the same, just like all of your jobs, it's not the same the way we look at things now as to where community control and probation was first set up, which was just follow the rules and then sanction them if they don't. We obviously are all looking at our mental health components, our addiction components, our resources and needs and evidence-based issues. And this group came together and super excited. It was a powerhouse group of probation directors, different departments and courthouses. So when Justice Stratton reached out after, I don't know that we knew who would actually look at the report. So I was excited to see that there's a group of people that are interested in us doing more. And so super excited to work with Ms. Knopp and the co-chair, Veronica Perry out of Medina, absolute rock star. So hopefully we'll be able to get some good work back out into the communities and lower some numbers for our officers, let their mental health and wellness be addressed too, because they fall into the same category. We're all in the same food chain, just different parts of it. So super excited to hear all of you today. You do good work, and it just reassures me that we've got interested, vested people in our state, and I thank you, and I thank you for the opportunity.
So I just wanted to give a little background of why we're doing a probation committee under the AG task force. A lot of people don't realize that under the Ohio Revised Code, probation is considered law enforcement. So as the chief law enforcement officer of the state, the attorney general, plus his daughter is a probation officer, was very interested in this topic. As Judge Cook said, we're going to be looking at the probation workload study committee report and the recommendations that came out of that. We're also going to be looking at training that's offered to probation officers on several topic areas. And then another area that the Ohio Chief Probation Officers Association, who is our partner with us on this committee, is interested in starting to examine a little more deeply is peer support in criminal justice. You all know that peer support has been very robust in behavioral health, but when we get to criminal justice, there are some unique challenges because of the rules of supervision and some of the other requirements on probation officers that we can't really connect them or associate them with folks that are convicted, which really makes it challenging when you're trying to create a peer in criminal justice. So those are the three areas that the committee is going to be looking at. The Chief Probation Officers Association, as Judge Cook said, is co-chairing it with her, Veronica Perry, and then there's several Chief Probation Officers on the committee and several line officers. So we wanted to extend an invitation to anyone out there. If you have any probation departments or officers in your community that want to participate on this committee, it will be all virtual like all the other committees that we have are. Please feel free to reach out to me or Carol or Justice Stratton, and we can get them connected. I know Judge Cook and Veronica will probably have our first meeting in April, May. We kind of need to work out the details of that stuff. But we are very fortunate that Judge Cook was willing to work with us on this, and we look forward to seeing what we can produce.
So it was just fortuitous, because we came up with this idea of the committee with Yost approval and knew nothing about the study. And here we had this ready-made study that was funded by the legislature that gave us a made-for agenda. And we also already have several judges that have agreed to be on it, several who are on the study committee. So I just want to make sure you're all aware of that. We will send the information out to Stacy about how to sign up for it, but just give Carolyn a call or send her an email and she'll put you on the list. So I want to thank all of you. Some of you traveled a long way to come today. I want to thank you for braving and coming in person and being willing to meet. We're really thrilled about some of the programming that was presented. As I said, this was being taped, so those that couldn't come in person, I have a really extensive email list, and so if Mr. Click wants to use that for getting information out, Office of Criminal Justice Services already knows about it. But we have 500 members of the task force. It goes to all our stepping up counties, who then send it out to anybody in their communities on their mailing list. It goes to our 48-member steering committee that has all the major associations and all the major state agencies. We encourage them to send it out to all their mailing lists, and it goes out to Ohio Justice Alliance of Community Corrections. So it gets a wide range. So if you have we really try to focus on funding and grants. We don't put a lot of reports and studies in there. We don't want to clutter their mailbox. It comes out twice a week. If you're not on the mailing list already, you need to get a hold of Carolyn, and you should be on it if you're an AG Task Force member, but we try to focus on all the funding, grants, federal, state, local, foundation, free trainings, and to keep you aware of what's going on. So it's a great resource that hopefully you all are taking advantage of as well. So anyhow, right on time, sorry, 1 minute late, but I'm very excited that we were able to get all of this in at the allotted 3 hours, and hopefully you all have safe travels home, and we look forward to our next in-person meeting, which we may be back at the state library, since hopefully we won't have these social distancing issues, where we can have a much smaller room and I don't have to force you to sit in the first few rows anymore. So thank you again all for coming and for being so active in our committees, and we appreciate every one of you and what you do for making a difference here. Thank you.